Back in late 2020, Ghost of Tsushima was one of the first photo mode videos I ever recorded. Now, on the eve of my 5-year YouTube anniversary, the follow-up game Ghost of Yotei is here. Let's take a look at the photo mode and see what we can learn from it. My name is Mir, and let's get started, shall we? To access the photo mode, press right on the D-pad. There's also a setting you may want to turn on. Pause the game, go to settings, go down to gameplay, and you'll see one that says photo mode archery. Go ahead and turn this on, and what this allows you to do is that whenever you pull out your bow and you aim, push right on the D-pad, and you'll be able to access the photo mode in the archery mode as well. For the graphics mode, I've left it on the ray tracing mode. One thing I found out is accessing the photo mode is a feature in itself. So if I access the photo mode and I move the camera around, let's say I want to stage the camera here. Let's say I exit, actually no, I want to go back to the photo mode. It'll actually save the position where the camera was. If I exit the photo mode and I move around for a different shot and then access the photo mode again, it resets the camera location. So just something to note when accessing the photo mode. So let's start with the camera controls. So the first thing we have is a tracking shot, and this allows you to put down different positions. So if I hit X, I can put down a position here, here, and let's say here. I can go all the way up to 15, and if I hit triangle, it'll play an animation based on the positions that I set down. What I would recommend is setting down more than 2 positions. So let's say if I put one here, and let's say I put one like here, what ends up happening is that it moves very fast. So let's say I want to do like a rotating shot. Let's say I start from here, I put one down and then evenly space it, make sure Atsu is right there in the middle, and just keep putting down a position. So here I have 10 positions set, and if I play the animation, it has a nice smooth rotation around Atsu. You can also dolly the camera forwards, backwards, left and right. So let's say I go from right to left, setting down positions in an evenly paced manner. The more positions I put down, the smoother the animation is going to be. So if I hit play, you have a nice smooth animation. Something else you can try is setting down a position. Like let's say I dolly into Atsu and then I turn the camera around. So position here, go up, and then let's say I go backwards from here. Play the animation. You can really have some fun with this animation mode, so just play around and see what you can come up with. Next is your focal length, which is marked in millimeters, and this is what you'll see on an actual camera, and it's set as a default for 23 millimeters, but actually you can go even wider than that. So here's 12 millimeter. This here is your wide angle, which introduces your wide angle distortion, where your foreground and your background, they're spread apart. They look like they're further away from each other. So if you go the opposite direction, you can go up to 300 millimeters, and this is kind of a tough shot to take right here. So I'm just going to move back a little bit. This here is your telephoto, which introduces your telephoto compression, where your foreground and your background, they look like they're much closer to each other. They look like they're right next to each other. One gripe I have with this photo mode is you don't have a lot of range with the camera. So with the focal length being higher, like let's say 200 millimeters, typically with a telephoto, you would want to move back. That way both of your foreground and your background are in the frame. However, the photo mode is kind of limited. So I'm moving back, and this is as far back as I can go. So it seems like there's a very limited range around Atsu where you can have the camera. Wide angle is not a problem. You can capture a lot in the wide angle, but it's the telephoto that I kind of wish they would open up the camera range a little bit. That way you can get more epic, shots where you can move around the camera further away from Atsu. Next is your roll, and if you move left or right, this rotates the image. And if you go a full, let's say 90 right here, that'll give you a portrait image. So next is your depth of field, and if we go ahead and turn it on, you'll see that the background becomes blurry. This blur in photography is known as bokeh. So the depth of field I would also call your aperture, because on an actual lens, this is what would be known as your aperture. And aperture on a lens is marked by f-stops, which is what they have here. So it goes all the way to f1.3, which is the blurriest it's going to get. And if you move around, like let's say you move around Atsu, you'll notice that it automatically focuses on her, which makes it a lot easier to get some of these shots. However, you do have the ability to change this. So if you go down one more setting, you have the focus distance. Go ahead and turn off the autofocus, and you have the ability to manually focus. So the easiest way to remember depth of field is that the lower your f-stop number is, the blurrier your background is going to be. And the higher your f-stop number is, the more is going to be in focus from the foreground all the way to the background. What I would recommend is that if you're at f1.3 to f2, something like that, keep that for portraits or anything where it's like an accent, where the focus is going to be on your subject themselves. Whereas if you have a landscape shot just like this one, I would increase the aperture, increase the depth of field. That way you have more in focus. So next, let's talk about the editing. And here we have the color grading. And personally speaking, I'm a big fan of the color palette already of the game, so I don't feel I would need the color grading, but the options that are presented are quite nice. They give off a nice cinematic feel and are very pleasing to look at. Let's say, for example, the color grading might be a little too much for your taste. Well, if you go down one setting, you have your color grading intensity. So we can go ahead and dial back some of the color grading if you choose. For me, 50% is kind of where I would want to stop, but really the choice is yours. Next is the exposure bias, and it's set at -1.5. And what this is that if you turn it down, it underexposes the image, and if you turn it up, it overexposes the image. So you could say that this is your exposure and or your brightness. The way I would recommend using this is take a look up here where the source of light is. So if I turn down the exposure bias, you'll notice that you'll start to get more details up at the top. So now you're able to see the source of light. But then if I move around, you won't be able to see anything else. And if I go the opposite direction, take a look at those clouds, and you start losing details in the clouds. So there's like a balance I would play by changing the exposure setting where you don't lose the details that you want to see up in the clouds and the source of light and so on, but you also don't want it to be so dark where you can't see it or too bright where it's just too blinding. So this will come down to personal preference, and really how you set the exposure is really up to you. Next is your contrast, and contrast is typically your relationship between your highlights and your shadows, or in this case it's saying black and white, and it's set to a value of 1, which is the lowest setting here to the left. And to me, this looks fine. I actually really like how this looks. It's very pleasing. If you start increasing your contrast, you'll notice that you'll start to see a harsh, defined line between your white and your black parts of your image. So instead of it being pleasing, it starts to become like a jumbled mess because everything is trying to have its own defined line. So with contrast, I would absolutely recommend you be subtle about it, or else you're going to have an image that just doesn't look great. But if you want to add a little contrast to make the image pop, that is perfectly okay. But again, at the end of the day, this is your image. You get to choose how you want to make it look. Next, let's move on to some of the environmental controls, starting with the particles. So here I'm standing under a tree that is giving its own leaves and particles that are falling on the ground. And actually you can override this. So if I just move it, now I have red leaves instead of the other ones that were falling before. And you'll see that it starts to accumulate here at the bottom as well. These environmental controls I think are the best part of Ghost of Yotei's photo mode because the environments themselves are just absolutely stunning. Not only do you have leaves and insects and so on, you can bring out crows as well. And once you have your particles on screen, let's go down to particle intensity, and you can change how much they appear on screen. So one particle I want to call out is one called Aurora Weather. So this one you'll be able to see with a clear sky and while it's at night. So if I move down to the time of day and I move it to nighttime, you'll be able to see the aurora in the night sky. And if I turn it off, you can see the difference there. So switching it back to the daytime, let's move on to the next setting, which is your wind speed. So you see the leaves falling. If I go to the left, they just start falling down and not really in any sort of direction. And if you increase the speed, it'll start moving in a direction. And that leans into the next setting, which is your wind direction. Now you can see it's going from right to left. And if I start moving this slider, you'll notice that the wind starts to rotate around Atsu. So now it's going into the screen. It's going from left to right. And if I continue moving the wind direction, now it's coming from the foreground going into the background. So with these particles and these controls, you have the ability to add a lot of texture to your image. Next is your clouds setting. So if we move this backwards and forwards, you can see that it manipulates the clouds up in the sky. But not only does it manipulate the clouds, you can also see that the sun is peeking through in between the clouds, and you can actually just cast shadows where you want or have rays of sunshine where you want them as well. As you can see up there, the birds that are flying, they just don't seem to care that the clouds are moving. It's not throwing them off their trajectory. Next is your time of day, and based on where you set the time, you'll see that the sun will be in a different position. So if I go here towards the morning time, right here, like in the the twilight hours, it gives a completely different look and feel to the image. Same thing if it was in the afternoon, in the evening, and the middle of the night. Once you find a time of day that you feel comfortable with and you like where the position of the sun is, you can move on to the next thing, which is the weather. So this I actually really like because I can go from this current weather to a nice clear evening, foggy, a heavy fog, so on and so forth. I absolutely love the fact that you can change the entire environment. This is my favorite part of this whole photo mode. And then you also have the ability to turn on or off the animated environment as well. This is especially useful if you have your particle and you want everything to look a certain way. You can just go ahead and pause the animation. That way you find the particle placement that you want. So one thing to note is that these settings also work once you hide the UI. So if I hit triangle to hide the settings currently, if I hit left on the D-pad, you'll notice that the particles start and stop even without any of the controls and features on the screen. So let's move on to some of the character options. So here you have the ability to hide Atsu, give her mud or blood. And if we go down, you have a bunch of different emotions to choose from. And actually, I want to commend Sucker Punch for this because what they put down, let's say angry, confused, dead, disbelief, disgusted, fearful, they've done a fantastic job giving you the ability to put yourself in Atsu's position, meaning that the emotions here are the same as if I go to my daytime job. This is fantastic. I love this. You also have the ability to show or hide your helmet or mask. And if we move on to sword glint, you'll notice that initially you don't really see anything on the sword. But if you turn on the setting, you'll see a sheen on the sword itself. And if you move the camera around, you can see that this moves around with the camera and kind of reflects the source of light off the sword. And you have the ability to show how much do you want the sheen to glow. So next are some finishing touches, like settings that you can choose. So here you have your aspect ratio. So if we go ahead and turn this on, you have a 21:9 aspect ratio, which gives you some cinematic crop bars at the top and bottom, and then a 32:9, which gives you a nice, really wide shot. This is perfect for any sort of wide landscape shot, which this game is perfect for. Next, you have some stamps you can choose, and these are all very tasteful, very well done. And really it just comes down to personal preference. And finally, you have some music you can add to this image as well. And this is perfect for any sort of animation that you add. If you found this video useful, please like this video and please hype this video. It's a new YouTube feature that just rolled out. And check out this playlist of other photo modes I've looked at in other games. That's going to be it for me today, and I'll see you next time.